The night was heavy with silence when the billionaire's sleek black car pulled into the long driveway. The mansion stood tall and imposing, its marble columns lit faintly by the golden lights scattered across the property. Normally, by this time of night, he would have been greeted with the usual hush of sleeping staff and the echo of his shoes on the polished floors. But tonight felt different. He couldn't shake the uneasy tension clinging to his chest as he pushed open the grand front doors. Inside, the house was strangely alive. Faint sounds echoed down the hall, soft laughter mixed with the clinking of plates. He frowned. He had not approved of any guests coming into his home, and certainly not at this hour. His business meetings had dragged into the late evening, and he had expected nothing but quiet. He loosened his tie as his footsteps carried him toward the living room, each step deliberate, each sound sharpening his curiosity. When he reached the archway, his eyes fell on a sight he never could have prepared for. His wife was sitting on the floor, barefoot, her hair loose, her expensive evening dress exchanged for a simple cotton shirt. Around her, 5 of the household staff, people who always lowered their eyes when he walked past, were laughing freely. There were no trays, no uniforms, no polished silver. They were gathered around the coffee table, eating a simple homemade meal, passing dishes like family. His wife was right there among them, smiling, her face glowing in a way he hadn't seen in years. For a moment he froze, gripping the edge of the doorframe. The billionaire who commanded boardrooms and shut down competitors with a single decision suddenly felt out of place in his own home. The staff spotted him first, their smiles fading into shock, the clinking dishes going quiet. His wife turned slowly, her eyes widening at the sight of him standing there, his tailored suit and sharp expression cutting into the warmth of the scene. "What is this?" His voice came low, controlled but heavy. His wife didn't flinch. Instead, she rose gracefully, brushing crumbs off her shirt. "This," she said softly, "is life. Real life. Something you've forgotten." He looked at the faces of the staff, people who had served him faithfully but had never dared to share space with him like this. A young maid lowered her head, guilt washing over her features. The old cook wrung her hands nervously. But his wife stood firm, her gaze unwavering. "You've built walls so high around yourself that you don't even know what happiness looks like anymore," she continued. "These people, they're not just staff. They're human beings. They laugh, they cry, they dream. Tonight, I wanted to remember what it felt like to sit with people without the weight of status or money between us." He felt his chest tighten. The room smelled of homemade soup, fresh bread, something warm and comforting that reminded him faintly of his childhood, days long before wealth, when his mother would gather him and his siblings around a simple wooden table. The memory stung. He had buried those moments deep beneath layers of power and ambition. And now, seeing his wife surrounded by people who looked at her with genuine affection, he realized just how empty the mansion had become. One of the staff members, a young man who worked in the gardens, dared to speak. "Sir, we didn't mean any disrespect. She invited us. We were just sharing dinner." The billionaire's sharp gaze shifted to him, and the young man swallowed hard, his voice trailing off. For a long moment, silence settled over the room. Then, to everyone's surprise, the billionaire stepped forward, his polished shoes clicking softly against the marble until he reached the table. He looked at the food, nothing fancy, just simple dishes of vegetables, bread, and stew. Slowly, he pulled out a chair and sat down. The staff exchanged nervous glances, unsure of what to do. His wife tilted her head, studying him as if she could see the battle waging inside his heart. Finally, he picked up a spoon, dipped it into the soup, and tasted it. The flavor hit him with a rush of memories. His shoulders eased, his expression softened, and for the first time in years the billionaire laughed, a quiet, genuine laugh that startled everyone. "It's been a long time since I've had food like this," he admitted, his voice lighter. He looked at the cook, who blinked in shock, then smiled shyly. "You made this?" "Yes, sir," she said nervously. "It's perfect," he replied. The staff's tension began to dissolve, replaced by something they had never imagined, sharing a meal with their employer, not as workers but as people. The billionaire's wife sat beside him, her eyes shining with quiet triumph. She had known all along that beneath his hardened exterior was the boy who once cherished family dinners and laughter, the boy who had been swallowed by ambition but not entirely lost. As the night wore on, the billionaire listened to their stories. The gardener spoke of his little sister's dreams of going to college. The maid shyly mentioned the book she was writing in secret. The cook shared tales from her childhood in another country, stories that made the billionaire laugh until his eyes watered. Hours passed and something inside him began to shift. He realized he had been surrounded by people who had lives, dreams, and struggles of their own, yet he had reduced them to titles: maid, cook, gardener. Tonight they had become more than that. They had become real. When the last dish was cleared and the laughter faded into comfortable silence, the billionaire stood. His wife slipped her hand into his and he held it tightly, something he hadn't done in far too long. He looked around the room at the faces that no longer seemed like shadows in his mansion, but like threads in the fabric of his life. "You've shown me something I forgot," he said quietly, his voice steady. "From now on, this house will not be a palace of silence. It will be a home." The staff exchanged stunned glances, their eyes wide with disbelief. The billionaire, once untouchable and cold, had opened a door none of them ever thought possible. His wife smiled, leaning her head against his shoulder, knowing she had won back a piece of the man she fell in love with, the man who once valued people above power. That night, as the billionaire walked through the quiet halls with his wife beside him, he felt a warmth he hadn't felt in decades. The empire he had built might have given him wealth, but tonight reminded him of something greater: connection, humanity, and the simple joy of breaking bread together. And for the first time in years, he didn't feel alone in his mansion. He felt at home.